The Dursleys are the characters we love to hate. However, the more we read about Aunt Petunia, the better we understand why she ended up this way. There is more to discuss and unravel from her past and the desire she had to be a witch, her secret agreement with Albus Dumbledore, meeting the Weasleys, knowing about dementors and so much more. That's why in today's video I'll be explaining Petunia's entire life, from her birth to her death in 2020. Petunia was the eldest child of Muggle Mr. and Mrs. Evans and had a sister Lily. However, Lily had many unusual abilities, such as making a flower's petals move without touching them, which her sister viewed with an envy and disapproval. One reason could have been because of the fact her parents praised Lily for her magical abilities and Petunia would have been jealous. Severus Snape was a boy who also lived in the town of Cockworth, who possessed similar abilities, and the two, Petunia and Snape, treated each other disdainfully. Lily, however, was interested by Snape and soon became good friends with him. Snape later on also developed a crush on Lily. When Lily received a letter from Hogwarts confirming that she was a witch, Petunia wrote to Albus Dumbledore asking if she could also study there too. Dumbledore responded saying that Petunia might not study at Hogwarts, and even though he responded kindly, Petunia felt hurt and left out, which also in part could have been because her parents were so proud of Lily's talents. From that point on, Petunia wanted nothing to do with magic or with the wizarding world, and frequently called Lily a freak. At some point in the early 1970s, Petunia left her home in Cockworth and pursued a typing course in London. This led to her getting a job, where she met Vernon Dursley, whom she found appealing. Vernon also took a fancy to Petunia, and the two went on a number of dates, which mainly involved Vernon discussing himself and his narrow views of the world. Vernon proposed to Petunia in his mother's sitting room in the late 1977. Petunia gladly accepted, but secretly worried what Vernon would think when he met Lily, who was then in her 7th year at Hogwarts. She eventually told Vernon about Lily being a witch on a date in his car, and while he was shocked, he assured her he wouldn't hold it against her. The couple's first meeting with Lily and her boyfriend James went poorly. Vernon tried to impress James with the car he drove, and when James responded by describing his racing broom, Vernon assumed he must be living on unemployment benefits. James told Vernon about his parents' fortune and gallants. The evening ended with Vernon and Petunia storming out of the restaurant, and Lily bursting into tears. Petunia and Vernon were married and settled at 4 Privet Drive in Little Whinging by the end of 1977. Fearing that she would be overshadowed, Petunia refused to have Lily as a bridesmaid, which upset Lily. Petunia had little contact with her sister thereafter, and the last piece of mail Lily sent her was an announcement of her son Harry's birth on 31 July 1980, which she took one look at and promptly threw it away. Petunia and Vernon's only child, a son named Dudley, was born on 23 June 1980. The couple took pride in being a normal family, unlike Lily's. Everything changed on the morning of 2 November 1981 when Petunia opened her door to find a baby abandoned on her doorstep. The child turned out to be her sister's son, Harry Potter. A letter had been left by Albus Dumbledore explaining the circumstances of Harry's arrival, including the death of both her sister Lily and her brother-in-law James. As she was the only member of the family that had her sister's blood running through her, this ensured the protection of Harry and his family from Voldemort and his Death Eaters. She agreed to take her orphaned nephew into her home and family. Petunia, however, didn't treat Harry as a welcome addition to her family. The boy's existence gave Petunia a constant reminder of her sister and the world she herself had been excluded from. She treated Harry poorly, even keeping him in the cupboard under the stairs as a bedroom for much of his childhood. She made a point of showering Dudley with gifts while completely ignoring Harry, although they were both around the same age. She forced him to do all the cleaning around the house, while Dudley was free to do anything he pleased. Petunia also told Harry that his parents had died in a car crash, and that the scar on his forehead came from the same accident. She didn't let Harry ask any questions about his family, nor generate any questions at all for that matter. When Harry's Hogwarts letter arrived in 1991, she supported her husband's decision to keep the truth from Harry. They constantly tried to burn or rip up the letters, but they found that nothing was helping to stop the letters coming to Harry. So Petunia and the rest of the family moved to different places in an effort to outrun the Wizarding Post, until finally they were tracked down by Rubius Hagrid. When Hagrid forced the issue of Harry's origin, Petunia lost control and let loose all of the resentment she had held in about Lily's life. She also became horrified when Hagrid gave Dudley a pig's tail after Vernon insulted Albus Dumbledore. Harry decided to enroll in Hogwarts to leave his miserable life and the Dursleys' abuse, and left with him to visit Diagon Alley. Just before Harry was to leave Privet Drive to the Hogwarts Express, she and Vernon had Dudley taken to a private hospital in London to have Dudley transfigured tail removed, and agreed to take Harry to King Cross Station simply because he was already part of the journey. When they believed Harry would be unable to travel due to the platform and 9 3/4 not logical existing, they left Harry at the station, laughing among themselves. However, Harry managed to successfully find the platform by meeting the Weasleys, allowing him to go to Hogwarts. Over the next several years, Petunia still permitted Harry to remain in her home over the summers, recharging the blood protections that kept her and her family safe from Voldemort throughout the rest of the year. In 1992, Vernon invited Mr. and Mrs. Mason over for dinner to try and secure a highly deal with Mr. Mason about stock of drills. During the day, she prepared a pudding for the Mason and spent most of the day cleaning the house. She and Vernon forced Harry to stay in his room and pretended he didn't exist. Due to the unexpected appearance of Dobby, the deal was completely ruined following Dobby's destruction of her prized pudding, causing the couple to leave their house in horror and disgust. Vernon then decided to have Harry locked in his bathroom, and she gave Harry cans of cold soup to eat through a cat flap in his bathroom door. Upon Harry's rescue from Privet Drive by Ron and his brothers, she, Vernon and Dudley tried to physically pull Harry back into his room from his window to stop him, but they all were left dangling out of the window when the Weasleys drove off and took Harry with them. Then in 1993, her sister-in-law Marge visited them. When she cruelly insulted Harry's parents, Harry accidentally lost control of his magic, which caused him to blow her up. Vernon insisted Harry return her to how she was, but was refused when Harry informed him that she deserved what she got for her rudeness. The Accidental Magical Reversal Squad later fixed her and modified her memory, ensuring that she remembered nothing of her negative experience with magic. In 1994, Petunia along with her husband decided to put Dudley on diet. He was too overweight to fit into the school uniform. She and Vernon were also shocked with Dudley's very poor academic performance, along with complaints of bullying other students. When the Weasleys came to pick up Harry by the Flow Network, she became threatened and didn't know how to react when in the presence of wizards, especially after when they accidentally destroyed her living room by blowing up their electric fireplace. When the Weasleys were leaving, her son Dudley ate a candy left on the floor by Fred and George Weasley, causing his tongue to swell widely. Petunia became hysterical at the sight of her son in such pain, resulting in Arthur Weasley fixing Dudley's tongue and repairing their living room. During the summer of 1985, Petunia and Vernon were suspicious of how Harry would constantly listen to the news, as they were ignorant of how Voldemort had returned, and that Harry was listening to see if Voldemort would launch attacks upon the Muggle world. She and Vernon were also totally ignorant of their son Dudley's antisocial behavior with his gang in the neighborhood. That summer, Dudley and Harry was attacked by dementors and were only saved by Harry performing underage magic. She revealed some knowledge of the wizarding world by telling Vernon what dementors were. When asked how she knew, she said that she heard the awful boy and Lily talking about him. The awful boy was Snape, by the way, but Harry at the moment thought it was his father, James. When Vernon ordered Harry out of the house, Petunia stepped in, after a howler later revealed to have been from Dumbledore arriving, telling Petunia to remember my last. Petunia made her decision to allow Harry to stay. When Harry finished his 5th year of schooling in June 1986, Petunia, Vernon and Dudley came to King's Cross Station to pick up Harry. However, they were greeted by members of the Order of Phoenix who ordered them to start treating Harry well at home, especially after Alastor Moody threatened him with his magical eye. In the summer of 1986, the Dursleys were visited by Albus Dumbledore at their house, who came to inform them and Harry of Sirius Black's will. Petunia was shocked with the sudden arrival of Dumbledore. She and her husband were very surprised to be informed that Harry had inherited 12 Grimmauld Place, and were terrified when house elf creature apparated into their living room. Dumbledore also warned Vernon and Petunia for abusing Harry growing up, and for how their spoiling of Dudley had emotionally damaged their child in a way that cannot be changed. Dumbledore took Harry with him afterwards, and Harry stayed the remainder of the summer at the Barrow with the Weasleys. In the summer of 1987, the blood protection on Harry was due to expire. Petunia, Dudley and Vernon were placed under the protection of both members of the Order of Phoenix. Just before the group left Privet Drive, Petunia watched her son offer the first words of acceptance Harry had never ever heard from Dudley, and she burst into tears on Dudley. Petunia walked towards the door to leave, looked back at Harry and opened her mouth to speak, but shortly after she pressed him back up and walked out. Petunia had wanted to wish Harry luck with his quest, but didn't and lived private drive with her family. They went into hiding from Death Eaters and Lord Voldemort, who probably would have tried to torture them into giving away Harry's whereabouts, and would have most likely killed him regardless. In later life, her only son Dudley married and had at least 2 children, making her a grandmother and mother-in-law to Dudley's wife. Harry had said to have been on Christmas card terms with Dudley and his family, and went to visit them occasionally, which his children hated. At some point before 2020, Petunia passed away for unknown reasons. It was probably Dudley who informed Harry about the news. It was revealed that she kept the blanket that Harry was brought to her in when he was a baby, which was given back to him after her death. That was all for today's video about the life of Petunia Dursley. If you have any idea about future videos, please leave it in the comments section down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.